Hello, and we are going to do a language revision challenge. We're going to include language and structure devices, spotting language devices, and doing a short piece of descriptive writing, all with the theme of Christmas holidays. So, are you ready? Have your pen and paper to hand, and let's begin. So for task 1, I want you to make 2 lists and I would like you to sort them into language and structure. Can we see the difference between language techniques and structure techniques? So pause the video, have a go, and then I will show you the answers. So for example, does verb go under language or structure? Does foreshadowing go under language or structure? And as you go through, if there are any of these terms you don't know, remember to look them up and revise them. This might be a good time to sit and make notes or even start thinking about making some flashcards. Pause the video and I'm going to go through the answers next. Okay, and here are the answers. Did you get these right? So we've got verb, adverb, simile, personification, metaphor, adjective, noun, pathetic fallacy, which is a challenge, and zoomorphism, which is a challenge, and onomatopoeia under language. And under structure, we've got foreshadowing and flashback, those 2 F's of structure. We've got setting, narrative voice, character, third person, which is a type of narrative point of view, and third person. And then also we've got third person omniscient, which is when it's godlike and can go into the thoughts, even in third person, of any of the characters. And so remember that was also a challenge term. So these are all structural devices. Remember, when you're talking about language and structure, the importance is the analysis and the explanation that you give of these things. And it's not just exploring language, but when we talk about structure, we have to explore what that structure device is doing too. Okay, let's move on. So types of figurative language: simile, metaphor, personification, you remember these, hyperbole, zoomorphism, and also there are idioms. Now I've got a whole separate video on idioms, so while I've listed it here, I'm not going to be covering it on the next challenge. On the next challenge, we're looking for either zoomorphism, hyperbole, metaphor, personification, or simile. So let's see if you can spot them here. Okay, give it a try. For each of these sentences, you have to decide which language device it is. So which is the figure of speech? Let's start with sentence 1. The snow was so deep, he thought he'd need a reindeer to fly him out. Sentence 2. The sleigh bells announced Santa's arrival with their harmonic song. 3. The mince pies called to him, tempting him to eat them all. The homemade candle she gave him was magic. Santa's sleigh swept through the sky like a painter's brush across a canvas. The carol singers sounded like angels. Now, if you need more time, and most people would, pause the video. Pause the video, take your time, and then I'm going to go through the answers in just a second. Okay. And here are the answers. So the first one was hyperbolic, hyperbole. The snow was so deep he thought he'd need a reindeer to fly him out. We're exaggerating how deep, and remember, for it to be not just exaggeration but hyperbole, we need to go beyond the literal. Okay, the sleigh bells announced Santa's arrival with their harmonic song, would be personification. If it were a person, what would it do? Personification. The mince pies called to him, tempting him to eat them all, called to him. Personification, if they're a person, there we go. The homemade candle she gave him was magic, metaphor. Santa's sleigh swept through the sky like a painter's brush across a canvas is a simile. The carol singers sounded like angels is another simile. And the children pranced around the room trotting about excitably would be zoomorphism. And there you go, that's an extra one that I didn't add. So there you go, there's zoomorphism. The children pranced around the room, trotting about excitably. Remember, if somebody as a human is given animal qualities or a thing is given animal qualities, it's zoomorphism. But that was a challenge that we don't have to know, but it can be helpful. Okay, we're going to work on story setting, and we're going to start by reading some examples of settings in a story from A Christmas Carol. Let's explore descriptions in A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Okay, as we look at each of these descriptions, I want you to pause the video and make notes. What does each description allow you to infer about Scrooge? Because when we're exploring structure, it's not good enough to say the writer sets the scene. What does that setting allow us to feel? What does it evoke? What feelings, what ideas for us? So here we go. Here's one example of the writer setting the scene. Scrooge never painted out old Marley's name. There it stood, years afterwards, above the warehouse door. Scrooge and Marley. So he doesn't have a partner anymore. Why has he left the partner's name on the door? What might that suggest about the character, that he's never removed the other person's name? Number 2, it was a great surprise to Scrooge while listening to the moaning of the wind and thinking what a solemn thing it was to move on through the lonely darkness over an unknown abyss whose depths were secrets as profound as death. It was a great surprise to Scrooge while thus engaged to hear a hearty laugh. Where was Scrooge at this time? Where was he, and what kind of mood is created here? And is there a contrast in mood? What can we infer from the language in this description of setting? And then we get to question 3. Example 3, he was conscious of 1,000 odours floating in the air, each one connected with 1,000 thoughts and hopes and joys and cares, long, long forgotten. Pause the video, make notes, and I'm going to go through some ideas with you. Well, what can we learn about Scrooge from number 1? Well, either we can infer that he loved Marley so deeply that he couldn't bear to remove his name, or when we read it in the context of the story, we see that he was so tight-fisted, he so didn't want to spend money to make things right or make things nice, that he would never have paid somebody to actually remove the name. It would have cost him too much. In number 2, it says, it was a great surprise to him while listening to the moaning of the wind and thinking what a solemn thing it was to move on through the lonely darkness over an unknown abyss. Well, an abyss is like a chasm. It's like a deep gap where nothing fills it. So there's a sense here that he's moving somewhere that is dark and sad and moaning of the wind. It's that personification, or if you're doing the challenge work, then it's pathetic fallacy, isn't it? The moaning of the wind, it's being given human emotion. Again, moaning, that verb moaning, and that onomatopoeia word moaning, suggesting that this is sort of dark and depressed and so sad at this moment in time. There's a hollowness, an emptiness, a darkness. And so as we look at this part, the mood that the writer's creating in this setting is a mood of sort of depressive darkness. It's kind of overpowering. And then the writer gives us that lovely contrast at the end. It was a great surprise to Scrooge while thus engaged. So while he was thinking about all of these dark things and thinking about these deep thoughts, there's suddenly some sensory language to hear a hearty laugh. So there is sensory language that is happy in hopeful, hearty laugh is a belly laugh. It's a deep laugh. And so there's that lovely contrast between darkness and light in that setting there. Okay, and thirdly, he was conscious of 1,000 odours. Well, we've got that lovely sensory language again in this bit of the setting. So language being used to help with this setting. Each one connected with 1,000 thoughts. Well, isn't it interesting that often odours and smells relate to memories? And so this is helping him remember his past, his hopes, his joys, his cares, the things that he had forgotten about a long time ago, letting us know that the character himself has lost the hopes and joys and cares he had when he was a young man. And the scents, the smells are allowing him to re-find those forgotten hopes and joys and cares. So again, we see him as somebody who has maybe lost the joyful and hopeful part of himself from when he was younger. So can you see that when we talk about setting, it's never just setting? What are we actually learning from the way the writer sets the scene? What do we learn about the mood? Always exploring. And now you're going to have a go yourself. We're going to use these picture prompts, and you're going to pause the video and spend 10 minutes writing a setting. I would like you to be inspired by one of these pictures and remember to use the senses. I'd like at least 2 paragraphs in 10 minutes setting a scene. Pause the video and have a go. Excellent work. And remember, have a really happy holiday.